Welcome to Writing Easy, the podcast that takes the act of writing, which can sometimes be not easy, and tries to make it less not easy. I am one of your hosts, Mary Mascari.
And I'm your other host, Melissa Long.
Today we're going to talk about just we were talking about how we always say writing is hard. We're going to kind of dive into that a little bit. You know, it is hard. Why is it so hard? Why does it take so long to get good at this? And hopefully this won't be a discouraging discussion. I hope it's an encouraging one.
I think it will be. I feel like I had the opportunity to interview a ton of writers, and one thing that I found was that everyone seemed to be surprised at how long it took them to finish their first novel, to get published, to find an agent. And they're like, I've been doing this for 10 years. I don't understand why it took this long to get to this place. And I started to see this pattern. I'm like, no, there's a lot of reasons why it takes that long. And we have these unrealistic expectations that it should be faster and that it should be easier and that it should just come to you and you should be able to do it. And so we must be doing something wrong because it's taking longer than we expected. But it's not.
Yeah.
It's like we just have the wrong expectations of the path of a writer.
This speaks to me a lot. I very much identify with this as well. You know, you get this feeling of like, well, I ought to be doing this by now. As like, I've been doing this for a long time. How come I'm not better? How come I'm not more successful? How come this isn't easier is the other thing. It's like, when does this get easy? You know, why is this, I still struggling with this? And, there's really good reasons why. And it's not that you suck.
Nope, that's down at the bottom. That's the lower level of the list.
Yeah. Especially if you've been doing it a long time. You probably don't suck.
Yep.
So what is it? What do we blame? Where do we, whose feet do we lay this pain?
So my theory is that the reason writing is so hard and it takes so long to master is because you have to be really skilled at multiple facets, right? You have to understand human psychology and human relationships. You have to have a vivid and active imagination and be able to pull from that imagination. You have to understand storytelling structure and grammar and language, right? And get really comfortable in that. And then you have to have enough perspective and experiences to draw from in order to create things that are really authentic. So it's like those initial stories that we write when we're younger and we go, well, they weren't that deep. Like there's a reason because we haven't had a chance to live. We have a very limited perspective, and it doesn't mean we can't write and end a story from start to finish, but we just don't have the same amount of knowledge and experience and perspective and even mastery of our own identity to be able to tell really deep, meaningful stories.
Mm-hmm. It really, you bring your entire self to writing. Not only is it from a mechanical perspective, it's very complicated. There's a lot of aspects to it. Like you said, you have to figure out a story. You have to you have to look at it, from the mega level of like the overarching story arc. You have to make sure you structure every scene right. You have to make sure you have your sentences are structured well, make sure you're doing the right word choice. You know, you think about word choice is a thing in something you're writing 100,000 words. Like, I have to choose 100,000 words. Like, that just shows you how complex it is just to put it together. But then, the thing underneath that is it takes a lot of depth. It takes a lot of understanding of what it is to be a human, or even if you're not writing about humans, it's still about humans and the world. And so just even having that, that depth takes some time.
Yeah, and word choice. I love that you said that and called that out because I was reading a book that had an exercise activity in it, and it was for short stories, but it was basically you write the same sentence 10 different ways. So you could only use those words, but you change the order and it changes the meaning and the tone of the sentence. And the whole thing is like, it's not just the word you choose, it's where you put that word and in what order and what's the cadence and what does it sound like? And then how do you stack that sentence with 10 other sentences to tell your story? There's so many choices that you have to make.
Yeah, and like you think I'm working at the sentence level on a novel. Like, whoa. That like this is going to take a while, and it does. But that's, that's the fun of it. That's what's cool, but it has a lot more dimensions than really I can't think of very many other art forms that have that many dimensions.
I can't think of any.
I mean, I always kind of get jealous of like a musician, right? It takes a lot of work. There's a lot of skill, a lot of practice. You have to, interpret the music, feel it. You're bringing your whole self to it. But you have music to play. That's been provided to you. You're not writing it and performing it together. And even if you are, it's only a few minutes long, and again, not to disparage music, because dude, I can't do it. There's a lot of science behind it. There's a lot of math. There's a lot to it. But yeah, it seems like every other art form has like one of these aspects, but writing has all of them.
Yeah, I think that's why you don't see, like, you see child prodigies, you see people who are sort of creative geniuses in music and dance and all of these other art forms, even in sports, right? But you don't see it in writing because it is so complex. It is so,
yeah.
It's not just one skill or one thing that you have to master. And I think when you do see it in younger writers, it is usually like songwriting or poetry or something that's very contained, because it's, again, less to have to learn and manage and navigate. And songwriting and poetry is a little bit more free form. Now, don't hate me. I am not a poet. I'm a really, really bad poet, and I don't study poetry. So, don't take offense to that. But I will say, like, there is a lot of freedom and flexibility in poetry, which is why I think that younger writers can connect with it more. And it's something that's short form typically. And so they can feel like they can start and end that thing and then get feedback on it and learn and play in it in a way that you can't do with a full-length novel.
Yeah. And then there's the other aspect, while we're complaining, of, again, another thing that I think is unique to writing, particularly novel writing or book writing, and I've said this before, that it's extremely difficult to get your work in front of people. If I can play a song for somebody, like, hey, we listen to my song, do. Oh, that's great. I can record it. I can put it out on YouTube. People can, because it doesn't take a lot of time, a lot of commitment to listen to someone's song. You hear it? Great, cool. Come see my show. That's always kind of tricky, but again, you sit down, you watch the show, you get a nice night out, great. Watch me dance. Here I'm dancing in front of you. Whatever. Here's my painting. It's up on the wall. Look, there it is. Oh, okay, great. And so on and so forth. But read my book. Like that's like, spend a few days with this, please. Like, really, it's a big commitment, and it's hard to get to them, right? Because you have to. It's a little easier now that it's electronic, but still, to get it to someone is hard. It's a harder sell. It's a harder thing. So, yeah, we've really we picked a good one, didn't we?
Yeah, reading somebody's book is a commitment. And it is one that I don't take lightly.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we're not saying this to be discouraging and to say, yeah, it sucks to write, blah, 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 because it doesn't suck. It's hard, but it's fun, and, we like doing it. But we're saying is don't discourage yourself. I think I heard this on Queer Eye, where Karami was saying, like, compare and despair. Like, oh, that's good. Right? So don't compare yourself to other artists, other writers, where they are in your career. Don't have an expectation of, like, I should be doing this by now. I should be writing faster. I should be putting out more books. I should be published by now. Like, all that is just going to make you miserable and make it harder for you to sit down and write.
Yeah. I will add to this, because this is one of my pet peeves, is that I think as an industry, we tend to try to make the process seem easier. Like we lean on trying to make it feel like magic. And it's just like, oh, it's inspiration. And it was so effortless. And, you know, I was just inspired and the words flew out onto the page. And then I'm handing you this thing without acknowledging the countless painful rewrites and the wanting to set your script or your manuscript on fire and all of those, all of that. We just hide that. We pretend like it doesn't exist. But also my pet peeve is ghostwriters and work for hire assignments, because what that does, and there are a ton of them. I know some people are completely oblivious. There are a ton of ghostwriters, and there are a ton of larger named authors, celebrity authors, politicians who get their name on books because it sells books, but they are not actually writing it. And it gives the impression that anybody can sit down and say, oh, I just decided to write this book in my spare time. And look how wonderful it is. When often they're not writing that book. They're consulted, they're giving interviews, they are maybe reading pages. But a lot of these are contract, work for hire, or ghostwriting positions, even with fiction. I know some people who are doing it. So I want to like just clarify that you're setting, if you're comparing yourself to a writer or an author that is successful that you don't know anything about, you have no idea don't compare yourself to them because you don't know what's going on in the backside.
You have no idea. Yeah. It's always a bad idea to do that. And there's also there's a story, and I can't remember exactly the story, so forgive me for paraphrasing, but it was something where an artist did something and they like drew a sketch and it took them a few minutes, like, and then they said, okay, well, that will be, $200. I'm like, what? Why should I pay $200? It took you 5 minutes to do that. And they're like, well, it took me 20 years to be able to do that in 5 minutes. So it's not, it's not just 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes plus 20 years. It's another thing to keep in mind, that even if you do hear about people who write really fast and, you can't, just don't compare. There's no room for sadness in writing, for self-flagellation. It's hard enough. We just talked about how hard it is. And now you're making it harder by getting mad at yourself or comparing yourself or being negative. It's just, there's no time for it.
If you need to compare,
and I'm telling that to myself as much as I am to you.
But I'm like, if you need to compare, just take a moment, once a quarter, once a year, to go back and look at the first thing that you wrote, because then you will see the growth, and you will see growth. Even if you consider yourself a hobbyist and you only write a couple of times a month, you're still going to see progress in the words that you put on the page and how you think about storytelling. And you're going to have learned new information, not only about yourself, but the world and the kinds of stories that you want to tell. And I find that a really encouraging exercise, because I can often get mired down in what I'm doing right now and why it's not good enough, and not realize that those 10 years or 20 years have actually significantly impacted my ability to tell stories.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really a good thing to do. Sometimes it's cringy. You're like, oh dear God.
Yeah.
But
I had somebody who wanted to read my first books, and I was like, I'm always like, you don't want to buy those. And I understand why authors do this. I never understood when I would meet a famous author and I'd be like, oh, I love this. And they're like, oh, like, not the first one.
Yeah, like, that was so bad. Which also I think can be encouraging too, that like even these people who you look up to, who you think are really great and they know everything, they too kind of can feel a little unsure of themselves. So, this is how this game goes. It's I've talked about this before, about like athletics metaphors. They just don't work for writing. At least I've never been able to make them work for writing. Athletics metaphors are great for short-term activities, right? They get you all charged up to push you through a short bit of difficulty. Where it's like, okay, I've got to finish this workout. I've got to do a couple more lifts. I've got to, pushing yourself to the edge. You got to get through this game. You kind of get yourself hyped up and you go. And, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, that the first 2 minutes are the hardest thing. And, if you want to use that metaphor there just to get you started, fabulous. But those are short-term things. And so after that time, you have to be a lot more gentle with yourself, a lot more zen and mellow and more patient, really, with the rest of it, so that it's a long haul. And if you are trying to keep yourself all pumped up and hyped up for this long thing and like go push, yeah, like you're gonna burn out. So don't be so hard on yourself. Be gentle. Be patient. This is what kind of art form this is. This is an art form of patience.
Patience, yeah. I mean, I think if you're going to compare, well, I'm going to say not compare, but I think if you're looking for a metaphor, I agree, sports is not the one.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it's almost entrepreneurial. Like if you're starting a business, if you ever tried to start a business, it is so complex and so nuanced. And there's a million things that you have to keep track of. And they often use that chess comparison. It's like, you've got to be thinking big picture, but you got to know your next moves and you got to know your options and you've got to know the environment and the opponents. And I kind of feel like that's what you're doing when you're writing, is like you are trying to juggle 10 different things all at once and get them to fit and work together. And then also think about, how do I make money off of this? And how do I promote this? And
we didn't even go into that part.
I know. So it's like
how frustrating the business part is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. In a good way. But yeah. I think that's why you see storytellers who are also, like, when you take those personality tests and it's like, you could be a writer or a business person, you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
That's why. Same skills.
You make things.
You make it.
I think generally speaking, the mindset to come to writing and as a long term is one of patience, of slow strategy, of understanding that there's a lot to it, and it's going to take time. It's just going to take time.
It takes time, and that's
in the meantime, yeah, it is. And that's okay. That's it. That's the real key. It's okay. It's not a race. No race writing. I think there's another reason. Like, you never see it. They've got reality shows for all kinds of art forms. You know, like, oh, we're gonna make knives. We're gonna glass blow. We're gonna do clothes and you know, all cooking. All these things. You can't do a writing show. That would be the most boring thing ever. All right, and go. All right, our next episode will be in 6 months. See you then. All right. So yeah, take your time, guys. It's all good. Don't stress. There's no time for that. We got enough things to worry about. Take that one off your plate. But one thing to put on your plate is, if you can, give us a review on whatever platform you can. That helps us out a lot, helps more people find the podcast, and, helps share the love a little bit.
Yes.
So we will wrap up by reminding you that, like, as we've been saying for the last 20 minutes, writing is hard.
So take it easy.
I'm Mary.
And I'm Melissa.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.